Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So Adam left a comment asking us to do a deeper dive into the Kipping escape, and that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. But before we get started, I just wanted to remind you that I'm going to be giving away a $50 BJJ Fanatics gift card if we reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We're at a good pace to get there, and yeah, I appreciate you guys' support. So I'm going to play a little intro that I made. It's a new intro, so it's kind of dorky, but hope you guys like it. Then we'll get into the video. So the goal of this video is to discuss the pros and cons of the different styles of kipping escapes. We're not going to do a deep dive into how to do it. We're going to discuss the different styles that each of the Danaher guys like to do, and that's what Adam wanted to talk about. It sounded like he understood how to do the kipping escape. He just wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the pros and cons of the different styles. So we're going to talk about that, but naturally we kind of have to talk about what the kipping escape is first before we can talk about the difference between the overhead and the misdirectional kipping escape. And then lastly, we're going to talk about which style I think is best. So the kipping escape is often associated with the Danaher guys, where you see Garry Tonon kind of flopping around like a fish to get the kipping escape to work, or Gordon and Ryan doing kind of a more relaxed variation of it. But regardless, we're not going to talk about how to do the kipping escape. Like I said, there's some free content on YouTube. I'll leave some links in the description below of ones that I liked. But if you guys are looking for the best of the best, Danaher discusses it in his New Wave series, the New Philosophy of Positional Escapes, Part 1. He talks about the kipping escape, and that's really, really good content. So help us get to 1,000 subscribers. I'll be giving away a $50 gift card that can potentially be used in conjunction with some of their sales, right? To get yourself some of the best instructional content for a very reasonable price. And again, I have no affiliation with them. I just think it's really, really good content. So when talking about the kipping escape, the most important detail is we cannot let our opponent control our chin through the form of a crossface, right? So if our opponent controls our chin, that means our back is going to remain flat on the ground, and we cannot perform the kipping escape with a flat back. The kipping escape we're going to be discussing in this video is from Mount, but I think this does a really good job showing what I'm talking about here. So this situation here from side control, Gordon's attention is going to relieving that crossface pressure. He's thumb posting inside the armpit of his opponent so that he can slip his head inside and really curl his body into that rocking chair like shape, right? And that rocking chair shape allows him to rock his body back and forth effortlessly, right? And that's what's gonna allow us to perform a successful kipping escape. Now, kind of the interesting thing about this is the best time to do a kipping escape is when our opponent is trying to crossface us and they have a low mount with their ankles crossed. Now, it's kind of interesting, right? Because the best time to do it is when they're trying to crossface us, but the most important thing is that we don't let them have a successful crossface, right? So I think that's where the battle is in either of the kipping escapes we're going to discuss. The battle is whether or not you can free your chin from their control and create that rocking chair like effect of your body, right? So again, it's not necessarily the best escape to do when people are doing tactics like grapevining your legs. It's more of something that you would use when your opponent is crossing their legs and maintaining a very low, tight mount. Now, I don't think it should be your first go-to mount escape with the gi on because it requires you to put both your hands on your opponent's hips. And if both your hands are on your opponent's hips and you have a rope around your neck in the form of a lapel, you're probably going to get choked, right? Whether it's a cross-collar choke or Ezekiel, you don't have much protecting your neck. So even if you were to successfully escape and they have a really good grips, you're still going to get choked, right? So in the gi, not necessarily your first option, but in no gi, it is super, super effective because it allows you to reliably escape into effective attacking positions to end the match. So now we're going to talk about the two types of kipping escapes, the misdirectional and the overhead. And first, we're going to talk about the misdirectional kipping escape. The idea behind it is you off balance your opponent in one direction and then go back in the other direction to complete the kipping escape, right? That's where the misdirection comes into play. Now, you'll see here in this example, Gordon is being cross-faced with the right arm of his opponent, which is forcing Gordon's face to look to his right. So the initial off balancing is going to go in the direction that Gordon is looking, right, to his right. And you'll see a lot of the Danaher guys, they don't actually bridge. They kind of swing their feet from right to left. And you'll see Gordon kind of swing his feet to the right here to off balance and ends up completing the escape without having the misdirectional aspect of it. Now, I think they don't bridge because people who know what they're doing and you go to bridge, they're going to do things like grapevine and kind of kick out your bridging foot to really kill your bridges, right? So instead, they do things like rock side to side to get you off balanced to complete their kipping escape. But I think it's important to note that it's definitely not going to be as strong as a bridge because there's no contact with the floor, right? So you're not going to be generating as much power with the bridge, so don't expect like a huge displacement of their body weight, right? So that's why I think that the best time to do this initial off balancing is when they're digging for an underhook. If they're digging for an underhook here, and you go to off balance them to the direction that you're looking, they don't have a post in that direction. So even if you swing your legs, they're going to have to post a lot farther than they initially expected, right? Now, in this example, he's going to bridge, and he's not going to do it as seamlessly as Gordon will do it, right? So he bridges, his opponent puts his hand on the ground. Now he comes back and kind of settles a little bit before doing the misdirection, but either way, he completes the misdirectional kipping escape, right? So going back to Gordon, you'll see Gordon do the misdirectional kipping escape with one arm in this scenario, right? One arm is isolated. Typically, we'd like to see both hands on the hips of our opponent, but in this scenario, Gordon has one arm being isolated by his opponent. So the initial off balancing is going to be to the side of his isolated arm, right? So he kind of swings his leg in that direction. And then you'll see as he comes back, which is why I think the misdirectional escape is super, super effective, is because as Gordon comes back in the other direction, his opponent is forced to remove that crossface hand and post it on the ground. Now they have no crossface, and Gordon is free to create that concave rocking shape position with his body and perform a successful kipping escape. So now for the overhead kipping escape, instead of going from side to side, we're bringing them straight over our body. But typically it's like has a slight angle like over one shoulder or the other shoulder, but we're trying to get their hips up and over our head as we're performing the kipping escape. Now, Adam mentioned this different arm configuration that could be used that Danaher says he prefers in the overhead variation of the kipping escape, where you put a bar across your opponent's hip line and you reinforce that with your other hand, right? And you do this grip instead of putting two hands on the hips of your opponent. And I just kind of wanted to mention that. I personally have not seen either Gordon or Garry use this hand configuration when doing a kipping escape in a live match, but maybe you guys have some examples, but I didn't see any. So right now I'm kind of leaning towards the idea of using the two hands on the hips just because it allows you to go kind of back and forth much quicker than the bar configuration there. So that's what I'm thinking are my initial thoughts there. So with that being said, that's kind of a natural transition into which style I think is best, the overhead or the misdirectional kipping escape. So think about it like picking a lock, right? Not every door requires the same key, and you're going to have to play with it and figure out how to unlock that door. And hopefully it doesn't come across like I'm trying to dodge the question or anything, but I think the best way to answer which style of kipping I think is best is to just kind of talk about the pros and cons that I've experienced with both of them and give you guys the flexibility to determine which is right for the situation that you're in. So with the misdirectional kipping escape, I think one of the benefits of this one is it's easier to perform with one arm. So if your opponent is trying to isolate an arm and they're nice and low in mount, which a lot of people do, then I think this one is easier to perform. And I also think a benefit of this one is that it makes logical sense to me, right? Like if our goal is to free our chin, this misdirectional kipping escape forces our opponent to completely give up their crossface if they want to not fall over, right? So the reason it works makes logical sense to me. A kind of downside to the misdirectional kipping escape is that if you look at Gordon's hips when he finishes the technique here, they're about in the same line as his opponent's hips. It's going to be hard for you to enter into a leg entanglement after it and go in for an attack, right? A lot of times when I'm doing this and I'm doing it against someone that's good and they kind of sense that they're losing the battle there, they'll kind of hop off into a knee on belly or side control kind of situation. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing because you escape the mount, and a lot of times when they dismount into knee on belly or side control, you're able to either like get an underhook when they're in side control or come up on a single like right away. Like it's not a bad situation to be in, but when you compare that to the overhead kipping escape, the overhead kipping escape finishes with your opponent's hips right above your head, right? And if your opponent's hips are over your head, you can enter right into ashigarami, right? That's the like classic ashigarami drill that the Danaher guys made really famous. So that's I think a benefit of the overhead variation is that it puts you in a very good situation to attack right away. But the downside to the overhead variation is I think it's a lot more difficult to get to work. And if it doesn't work, you end up kind of flopping around looking like a crazy person, right? And you don't really get anywhere. Whereas the misdirectional one, you can kind of go side to side and just kind of like work at it incrementally, right? Where the overhead one, it's a little more difficult to do that. But again, if it does work, you're in right on a very strong attacking position. So hopefully that gives you guys an idea of the pros and cons of each of the kipping escapes. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you haven't shared the video, please share the video, and we'll see you next time.